It's 9 o'clock. I'm going to call the meeting to order. And I'll ask you if there's any disclosure of pecuniary interest. Seeing none, go to public meetings. Welcome and good morning. Today there is one public meeting in accordance with the Planning Act. I'm pleased to advise you that this is being broadcast live on the Township's YouTube channel, where a recording of this meeting will be available. As the proposed housekeeping zoning bylaw amendment applies to all lands within the township, notice of the public meeting was given in accordance with the Planning Act by placing an ad in 3 local newspapers with sufficient general circulation in the area to which the proposed amendments would apply. All of this was in conformance with the Planning Act process for a statutory public meeting. Additional notice was also posted on the township's website and social media channels. The purpose of the meeting is to inform and provide the public and Planning and Development Committee with an opportunity to ask questions or express views with respect to the proposals. The format of the public meeting will be as follows. 1, township staff will generally explain the purpose and effect of the application. 2, next, the public will be permitted to ask questions and express views on the proposal, and then the public portion of the meeting will be closed. And 3, lastly, members of the committee will be given the opportunity to ask questions for clarification on the proposal and provide comments. At the conclusion of the meeting for the application, township staff will be given the opportunity to respond to the questions and comments received. No decision will be made today following the public meeting on the proposed housekeeping zoning bylaw amendment. Following this meeting, the information obtained, including from questions and comments submitted by members of the public and committee, will assist township staff to determine next steps. The township is the approval authority for the proposed housekeeping zoning bylaw amendment, for which this committee may recommend the bylaws to be considered by council or ask for additional information prior to council's consideration. If in the future, township council decides in favor of the application by adopting recommendations from this committee, members of the public who have provided oral or written submissions but disagree with the decisions may be entitled to appeal the decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal under the Planning Act. Individuals attending the public meetings by Zoom, YouTube, or telephone may email or call the township's planning staff to submit contact information to receive notice of the decision of the applications.
Yeah, we're good. Thanks.
So now we'll go to staff's presentation. I will now call on township staff to please present the information provided within agenda item C 1.3.1 of the agenda package and explain the purpose and effect of the application. So I'm not sure if that's Katie and or Brad.
Thank you, Chair Taylor. I will be speaking to item C1 on the agenda today.
Oh, thank you, Emily.
Brad and I both will be. So just to start, I'll emphasize again that these are just proposed amendments. The purpose is to kind of get feedback from committee and members of the public on these various really minor changes to the zoning bylaw. The intention is to sort of clean up the zoning bylaw and have it act as like a spring cleaning or housekeeping to correct errors or correct repetition within the zoning bylaw, with the overall intention that the zoning bylaw will become easier to read for the average individual. Because I know it can be quite daunting if you don't deal with the zoning bylaw every day. So a lot of these changes are to improve clarity and further explain how these policies are actually applied in practice to building permits and things like that across the township. So I will share my screen and I'll present the first half of the application and Brad will go through the second half. So hopefully you can all see my screen now. Again, I would like to preface that this is not related to the ongoing official plan review. The way the Planning Act sort of sets out the process for updating the official plan requires that an entirely new zoning bylaw be put into place following the adoption of a new official plan. So these really are just small minor changes to the existing zoning bylaw in conformity with our current official plan. This is a totally separate process. It is a standard practice by most municipalities within Ontario, just to address minor or technical issues identified in the application of the zoning bylaw on a day-to-day basis. This is not a new practice to Severn either. The township has undertaken other housekeeping amendments in 2012 and 2018 with new mapping schedules to correct mapping and zoning errors completed periodically. Again, these are proposed changes only, so we really are seeking feedback from residents who have thankfully taken time to join us this morning and from members of committee. And feel free to ask any questions to make sure that we can provide you with the details if we do have them. Again, if staff aren't able to answer the questions at this time, we will return to council and committee at a later date with further information to assist in answering those questions. So again, these are all supposed to be really minor changes. A lot of it is to ensure consistency across the zoning bylaw and with higher levels of policy that are applied. As the lower tier government committee might be familiar that we are required to be in compliance with the province and the county as well. So there's certain things that have been updated either at the provincial level or the county level that we would just need to tweak slightly in the zoning bylaw to make sure we're aligning with those policies. Other proposed changes are resultant from common applications that are seen at the Committee of Adjustment that staff have usually always been supportive of because the provincial policy and county policy is also supportive of it. So just correcting those minor changes in the zoning bylaw to make sure that we're in conformity with applicable policy and in conformity with the wishes of the township residents, as they are common applications that we do see at C of A. So I'm just going to switch my slide here. So basically what we mean by conformity is that as the lower tier government, we are required to be consistent with or do not conflict with higher levels of government. So that being the County of Simcoe, the province, and the applicable ministries. Common ones are the Ministry of Affairs and Housing, OMAFRA, things like that. Other law being the Ontario Building Code. And at a federal level, that does include the Transom Waterway, as the Transom does pass through Severn Township. So through the Planning Act, this is sort of the hierarchy of policy that the zoning bylaw needs to be in conformity with. I know members of committee are probably already familiar with this, but for the purpose of those individuals from the public joining us this morning, the zoning bylaw is required to be consistent with all of these documents from the provincial and county level, as well as our current approved official plan. That being said, today we're not going to be discussing severances, changes to lot sizes, things like that. That is all a discussion to be had once the new official plan has been put into place. This is strictly to be based on our current official plan, OMB approved in 2010. Other proposed changes, as I had mentioned, or from consistent applications that we do see to council and committees, typically in our settlement areas where growth is encouraged and expansion is encouraged. And then in providing improved clarity for building permit applications or other development proposals, really ensuring that the wording of the zoning bylaw is very clear to the average individual to make sure that when they're getting to the building permit stage, it is very clear what the expectations are and what the restrictions are. Overall, it's intended to make the process easier and kind of prevent those hiccups down the road. And again, all the proposed changes are consistent with that identified hierarchy of policy in Ontario. For those members from the public joining us today, all of the really detailed proposed changes down to the very last comma or period or semicolon are described in staff report P22011. That is where all this information is coming from today. It is available on the township website, so we would really encourage individuals to take a read through that and of course follow up with staff if they have any additional questions at a later date. We're happy to assist and provide clarity. So I'll start with section 3. These are the general provisions. A lot of them relate to accessory structures and things like that on residential properties or other properties within the township. So there are a few key recommended changes that I will expand on. However, again, most of these are very minor, intended to provide clarity to their application. So it could be as simple as adding a comma, adding a little bit of an extra blurb at the end of a sentence to further clarify what is meant when that provision is applied. The general intent of every policy in the zoning bylaw through this proposed housekeeping will be maintained. It's not intended to majorly change the zoning bylaw. There's not going to be any large or reaching changes until that new official plan is put in place. Again, this is based on our current official plan. So just I've highlighted 4 sort of key sections that staff have had questions about since the advertising of the application. And also just sections that we felt would be really important to highlight as there are positive changes and loosening of restrictions for residents. In particular, I would really like to highlight sections 3.25 to 3.28, which would be the accessory structure building size, number, and coverage for residential uses. So staff through the Committee of Adjustment have really seen a high volume of applications related to the construction of accessory structures in our fully serviced settlement areas, such as Coldwater. So we're hoping that with our proposed changes, we can provide a slight loosening of restrictions for those or slight relief for accessory structures in those fully serviced settlement areas. An example being increasing the accessory structure coverage within these areas of the township to 7.5% from the current 5%. This would allow those structures to be slightly larger or to have more of those structures on the property. The growth plan does encourage growth and this type of expansion within the fully service settlement areas. So it's really keeping consistent with that. We also are encouraging or proposing that the number of accessory structures be determined from the detached accessory structures, being an example like a shed or a detached garage, which would exclude attached garages and attached decks. This is consistent with neighboring municipalities as well. The overall intention is to allow those individuals living in fully serviced settlement areas to take advantage of that and allow them to kind of benefit from that increased accessory structure coverage number and consideration of only detached accessory structures. The next sort of not major change, but other change that was identified by the Transom Waterway. Again, they are a higher tier government. So we are required to be in conformity with them. Our changes to our boathouses, ports, and docking facilities. I will emphasize that this is not to change the existing permitted size of these structures or existing permitted envelope of these structures. It's simply to provide clarity and consistency between the township zoning bylaw and the Severn policies for docking structures. Overall, the intention is to make that process a bit smoother so you're not getting through one of the steps and then moving on to perhaps the township and being restricted by our policies. It's just to make sure that it's a smooth process from start to finish. So the Transom Waterway has clarified the minimum separation they require between dock fingers. So that way you can get boats easily in and out. And they have also clarified the supporting structure for boathouses and boat ports, meaning that docking structure that the roof is on top of. So they've provided sort of what their maximum finger width is. Again, this isn't to change the permitted maximum size of these structures. The envelope and the total size will remain the same. It's strictly to provide clarity about what the design is, consistent with the Transom Waterway, again, to improve and expedite that process to make it smooth from start to finish. So moving on to the sort of third sort of key recommended change from section 3 of the zoning bylaw would be changes to non-complying structure policies. So the zoning bylaw does provide direction on how individuals who own properties that have non-complying structures on An example being a dwelling located too close to a lot line or too close to the shoreline. We see this pretty commonly in older developed areas of the township. Houses are typically built closer to the water, but as council and committee know, the province is really encouraging growth towards the rear of the lot. And this subsequently is needed to be reflected in our policies. It already is reflected, but again, this is just to provide clarity about how this is applied. So that way it's very clear to applicants and residents. They're not going to be sort of blindsided when they submit their application. It's just to increase that clarity. So this would further identify that requirements for expansions of non-complying structures that are really close to the shoreline are to be to the rear of the property, to the rear of the dwelling behind that front wall. This is typically how it is already applied. It's just, again, providing that clarity to applicants. So that way going into the process, they know what the restrictions are. Again, intended to sort of make that process very smooth and approachable. The last sort of section that I wanted to highlight today in the overall Section 3 general provisions is related to garden suites. This is not to do with the official plan. Again, I will emphasize it's not to discuss these adding additional units to properties. It's strictly to update our policies to align with the Planning Act. Committee might be familiar that the Planning Act was recently updated to allow these temporary structures on lots for a maximum of 20 years, whereas our zoning bylaw limits them to 10. So it's sort of just deferring to that regulation to be consistent with the Planning Act. Again, it's not to increase the opportunities for these units at this time. That is something that will follow after the official plan. So this is kind of just providing that clarity and making sure that our regulation is consistent with the province at this time. So that is all I have for the sort of Section 3 general provisions. Through the chair, I will pass it over to Brad and he can chat about the last remaining proposed changes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you and good morning, everybody. I'm just going to bring up the remaining slides here. All right, so moving into Section 4, the parking and loading provisions. So after working with the bylaw for a while, staff have identified some areas of this section that could do well with being clarified. So there are various amendments proposed to reduce repetition, ensure the defined terms are used when establishing the required parking ratios, as well as a general tidying of the parking requirements and ensuring consistency across the section. For example, one of the proposed amendments would be the inclusion of a utility trailer within the existing trailer parking provisions. So we already do establish parking provisions for trailers, and this amendment would just include a utility trailer in those provisions. Additionally, it is also proposed that a minimum snow storage requirement be established for new large developments. So those could be things like larger commercial developments and just making sure that there's an adequate area for snow storage during the winter months to not impact parking, for example. Moving into Section 11, the definitions, there are a number of minor amendments here that do provide clarity within the definitions to align with interpretation and application. So for example, right now, our zoning bylaw defines the term lot line side, and we are proposing to update that to lot line interior. The bylaw also currently defines a lot line side exterior, and the proposed amendments seek to update that to lot line exterior. So the proposed terms are what are used consistently throughout other sections of the zoning bylaw. So these types of amendments just help to ensure that clarity across the bylaw, make it essentially more user-friendly. There are two new definitions proposed, the first being a farmer's market, and that would be permitted within the institutional and open space zones. So areas like churches or community centers to allow for those types of uses to take place there. The proposed definition is consistent with neighboring municipalities as well. And finally, the second new definition is a front wall. So this definition would clearly identify a building's front wall, and that identification and the definition is consistent with our current measurement of building height. So the last proposed amendments to the bylaw here just relate to mapping amendments. So there are a number of mapping amendments that are proposed to correct inadvertent errors or omissions that have been lost since the passing of the initial zoning bylaw in 2010. This would seek to return previous zoning rights that have inadvertently been lost to residential properties. So for example, there's some properties on Trent Trail that are proposed to be corrected back to the Shoreline Residential 2 zone, and some properties on Island Road, just returning those rights that the property owners had, but were inadvertently lost. There are also a number of site-specific amendments that have been requested by property owners. So these types of amendments don't necessarily warrant their own Planning Act application, especially to go through with the expense of that for property owners in these types of situations. So the housekeeping amendment here is a great opportunity for the township to utilize this process to incorporate these changes. So for example, the Couchiching Conservancy has requested staff to rezone a number of their properties to the environmental protection zone to establish protections on the land, as well as in the Saint Amant and Hodgins Road area. Properties there currently have a holding 14 applied to them. So this amendment would propose to lift that holding 14, as the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks has advised that an adjacent landfill has now been delisted. So the protections that the H14 initially applied are no longer necessary in this case. So that concludes staff's presentation for the subject application. We do wish to reiterate that no decision is proposed to be made today, and that the purpose of the meeting is to just obtain comments from the committee and public on the amendments. If the committee or any members of the public do have questions, staff will endeavor to provide an answer today. However, if further review is required, staff may follow up in writing following the meeting or in a subsequent staff report to committee or council. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Brad. I'll open up to the public questions and comments. Any persons present on Zoom or on the telephone who have either questions or comments on the application will now be invited to speak. Township staff will call upon each registered participant. Please unmute yourself when called upon and turn on your camera if you wish. You will be required to give your full name and address for the minutes. Please note that your comments will also be recorded and live streamed to the Township's YouTube channel and will remain online. The Township does not have the ability to edit the live stream to remove any personal information provided in the course submitting comments or questions. So I guess, is it Brad, you're going to call, if you can call the first name on the list and ask them to come on and say your name and address.
Thank you, Chair. I will just work through the list here. The first person who is registered is Dorothy Hill.
Can you say, I didn't catch the name there, Brad.
Oh, sorry, Dorothy Hill.
Okay. Dorothy, are you online there? I see Dorothy up on the screen there, Madam Clerk. If
unmute.
There you go.
Okay, I'm unmuted now. Yes, I'm here with my husband, Larry Hills. We live on Gray Shot Drive on Lake Couchiching, and we have concerns as to the proposed changes that obviously you had mentioned are just housekeeping at this moment, but there are changes in this section of bylaws which could possibly affect us and others in our residential area. So our concern, I guess, is what changes will be made after this housekeeping is done and what participation we will have in those changes.
If Brad or Emily can answer that.
Thank you, Chair. So the proposed changes that result from today's meeting or from further discussion will be brought back to Council for consideration, which will be another meeting that you'd be welcome to join. Again, as a participant for this meeting, you will receive notification that that is going forward. Again, at this stage, it is very minor changes. A full comprehensive entire new zoning bylaw will come into place after the official plan. So that is still a while down the road. We would definitely encourage you to participate in both of those processes to make sure that all of your thoughts and comments are included and considered in the development of those documents. Is there any sort of specific sections identified today that we might be able to provide some insight on or follow up with you on?
Basically, I'm thinking about I'm looking at sections 3.2 with regards to boathouses and accessory buildings and how much area that they could in the future possibly build on as compared to what it is now. Also with regards to boathouses, it's supposed to be inhabitable. And I'm wondering if that is a proposed change.
Thank you, through the chair. So no, the size of boat houses and ports are not proposed to change, and they're not proposed to allow any sort of habitable living space. All of the accessory structures across Severn are not permitted to contain living space at this time unless it is a sleeping cabin. So that would only be in certain zones of the township. So no proposed changes to add living quarters to any boat ports or boat houses at this time. The slight relief for accessory structures would be mostly seen in fully serviced settlement areas of the township. Currently, right now, these structures are allowed to occupy 5% of the total lot area. Based on applications to Committee of Adjustment and support from the growth plan, we propose to sort of increase that really modestly to 7.5% of the lot. The maximum size of 110 meters for these structures would be maintained. It just sort of allows those lots where development is focused in the township to kind of take advantage of that and have that slight relief.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Brad, who's number 2?
Phil Brennan.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I have no comments at this time. I just appreciate being able to sit in on this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, Brad.
Jerry Van Hout.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity. I guess similar to the previous resident, I was hoping to obtain a copy after this meeting of the commentary as was mentioned at the opening. Secondly, I guess I was hoping for some clarification on the, you were mentioning what I will call secondary or ancillary buildings on a property. And I guess this is an area of interest to residents. What was mentioned were detached garages and sheds, but I'm wondering what the impact of this would be on secondary residents. These would be for non-commercial purposes, but for additional residential space. I'm thinking like bunkies or additional secondary residence on the property for family members. And if that is being impacted by the definitions that have been described today, or is this something that may be further clarified at another meeting? And my address is 3644 Shadow Creek Road in Severn.
Thank you. If Emily or Brad could answer Jerry's question there.
Yeah, thank you, Jerry. I can follow up with you after the meeting and provide you with a link to the detailed amendments so you can see exactly what is proposed to change within Section 3 as related to accessory structures. And additionally, your comment about additional dwelling units, that is something that's being reviewed as part of the township's official plan process. So if you're not already participating in that, we would encourage you to register to participate, and I can provide you with that information as well. And that's something that if you follow along with that process, there'll be some information released later after that's been reviewed. And those types of amendments would take place, as Emily had mentioned, in the subsequent new zoning bylaw, should the official plan include those policies and permit those.
Thank you. I would appreciate very much the linkage or the ability to link into to the other additional processes that you've described. And
Yes.
I would very much like to reconnect after the meeting. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
I'll
Okay,
follow
thank
up
you.
afterwards.
Okay, Brad, the next one.
Megan Hawkins.
Do we have, is it Megan Hawkins, you said?
Mhm.
Okay, if she's around, we'll come back to her, but we'll go to the next one.
David Mitchell.
Okay,
Tom Morrissey.
Just to finish up David Mitchell, I registered for the meeting, but I didn't have a particular question.
okay, thank you very much, David.
Tom Morrissey.
Tom Morrissey, okay.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, we can.
So my
Could you-
concern,
Could you give us your name and address, sir?
it's Tom Morrissey, 2400 Warminster Road, Severn.
Thank you.
So my comments are regarding the definition of farmer's market. I'm a farmer and I go to markets, and the province has an interest in what the definition is. We've experienced the COVID situation, and the health unit defined a farmer's market in a certain way and allowed certain provisions for operation. There's also Farm Markets Ontario, which is the provincial association of farm markets, and they have a definition. So I'm hoping all of these will align. But the thing that I'd like to say is that we at the fairgrounds operate a flea market in conjunction with the farmers market. And I would hope that the definition could include the provision of a flea market, craft market in that, so that operations would be possible for both of those at the same time. And I think it's important to realize from a township point of view that a farmer's market is really an incubator for small businesses. We have many small businesses that have operated and moved on to storefronts and to restaurants. So the operation of the farmer's market is a really good stepping stone for many entrepreneurs to test out their idea and develop and then move into businesses in our township or in surrounding townships. So that's not just a farmer, that's also food preparation, that's also somebody who's doing a craft, but we don't want to exclude those people who are doing crafts and art because the only thing you could operate would be, or try it out at, as a farmer's market, which does have restrictions on the business's ratio. So that's why it's important to have both a flea and craft market and a farmer's market definition.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So we made a note on that, Brad, then we'll go to the next person.
Yep. The next person registered is Doug Brandon.
I see a Carly Brandon on the screen there.
Yeah, they were the next person registered. So I wonder if maybe Carly wants to speak.
Doug Brandon. I'm not sure whether I'm muted or not.
No, you're on there, Doug. So it's Doug Brandon, your address, Doug?
2085 Blockwell Line in Severn. I'm just here as a concern. Some of the things that you've talked about that were in the report were really not mentioned. Like you talked about agricultural and rural zones, dwellings, whether they were single or residential care facilities or boarding house. Is that, are you going to talk about that later on today or no?
Go ahead, Brad.
Thank you, Doug. I was just wondering if you can maybe clarify your question.
Well, it was section 1955. It talked about agricultural and rural zones. Dwellings could be single or residential care facilities or boarding house. So that wasn't really discussed this morning already. But it was part of the report.
Okay, I think Katie's got her sign up to comment on that. Katie, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair Taylor. To Mr. Brandon's comment, that is just for one site-specific property, and it's restoring a previous permission that seems to have been lost over time. So that's just pertaining to one specific property. It's special provisions for the exception of RU-3. It's located within the draft bylaw proposed by staff that's included within the staff report.
Okay, and the other concern that I have is about the proposed garden suites. You're going to increase it from 10 to 20 years. Will there be an exception there to extend it based on the life of the resident that's in that building? So in other words, 20 years, but it could be extended by an application due to circumstance.
I think Katie's got an answer there.
Thank you, Chair Taylor, through to Mr. Brandon. Again, the changes we're proposing to the garden suite provisions in the township zoning bylaw are to align with the Planning Act. So the Ontario legislation, the Planning Act, it primarily deals with garden suites, and it has been extended to a 20-year timeframe. There is a possibility for extensions after that. And of course, who's to say in 20 years from now what the legislation will say at that time, when or if council could weigh in on that extension request at that time. So certainly that is something already in the legislation, and all that staff are proposing with this amendment is simply to clean up the township's policies to just refer to the Planning Act, since it is the governing legislation here.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Doug, and we'll go to the next person.
Carly Brandon.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, if you can just say your full name, Carly, and your address.
Sure, Carly Brandon. So the address in question is 2085 Bockwell Line.
Okay, thank you.
So I just wanted to say thank you for the updates to the garden suite. That was amazing and provides a lot more flexibility, especially for aging parents. And then I had two other questions that were in the agenda, but we haven't covered yet. So I don't know if I should ask them here or take that offline. So my first question was about staff report P2212. And then my second question would be about rural high-speed expansion with the two towers. So I'm happy to take that away and ask those questions if that's not covered for this meeting.
Yeah, that E1.1 is going to be pulled out under new business. So you might hear some discussion on that. And then I'll let the clerk weigh in with your comments too, Allison.
Certainly. So Ms. Brandon, maybe perhaps reach out to me after the meeting, whom we can make sure that we either get your questions answered or we point you in the right direction to get your answers.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Carly. And then there's a delegation coming up with two different towers coming up in the township. So that might answer some questions too. So next person, Brad.
Thank you, Chair. Dave Morris.
I see a David there on the screen, but okay, we'll go to the next person, and if Dave comes back, we'll put him on.
Mark Jones.
Is Mark Jones there? Okay.
Lynn Smith Servos.
Okay.
Ashley Doyle.
Is Ashley there? I don't see her on the screen here. Okay.
Lisa Shembry.
Okay.
Deanna Adams.
Okay. Anybody else?
We didn't have a last name, but Christine. Craig Limprey.
I do have someone who's raised their hand. I just can't tell who it is. Give me one moment here. Kathy Wingfelder, is that someone you've called?
No, she is on the list here.
Perfect. Kathy will get to you.
Jerry and Cheryl Elliott Fraser. Michael Corey. Lee Archer. Kathy.
You didn't hear me, right?
Oh, there's okay. There's Michael Corey there. If you can, yeah, you just.
Oh,
say
sorry, yeah, no, I have my microphone on my headset, but it didn't seem to work. This is Mike Corey from 1910 Henry's Landing.
Okay.
I was just looking for confirmation of a list of where you're planning on doing the housekeeping. To make sure that none of the areas are specifically or directly impacted. Specific house addresses.
Oh, sorry, through the chair. Is this regarding the site-specific rezonings that are proposed?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so included at the end of staff reports P2211 is the list of the site-specific zonings. Again, these are all lots that had either asked for the specific rezoning or is restoring zoning rights to properties that might have accidentally been lost when the map was converted to digital. So it's if you weren't aware previously or had been notified or asked the township specifically for these changes, it likely would not impact you, but I would definitely encourage you to check out staff report P2211. You're more than welcome to follow up with Brad and I after the meeting as well, and we can send you the direct link if that's helpful.
No, that's perfect. I was just making sure they're not specifically for us or other properties in the area. That's all, because I saw surveys and stuff being done a couple years ago around our place.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, Brad, you had, I think Kathy was the next one.
Yes, yeah, Kathy Wingfelder.
Good morning. Thank you. I live at 20, so it's Kathy Wingfelder, 23 Shepherd Street in Coldwater. I don't have access right now on my phone walking my dogs to the agenda, but there was an area on there regarding accessory buildings, outbuildings, I would call them, sheds, where people are working from home on residential areas. If that's being looked at as far as how many they can have, how it encroaches or, close to lot lines, that sort of thing, where you're, I've already called the township on this in the past and just wondering if there's going to be any clarification on how many sheds, temporary buildings, these are all temporary structures that are used for people that work from their home outside. If that's on I thought I saw that under the accessory building area of the agenda or the blurb that was sent out.
Was that your area, Emily, that you spoke to?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Taylor. I can try to assist with that. So the accessory structure provisions are strictly for those that are accessory to residential uses, such as like a private residential garage and things like that. If there are concerns about home industries being operated, they are only permitted in certain zones within the township. So certainly we can, if you would like to speak more about that after the meeting, we can definitely arrange a time to do so. But again, the changes to the accessory structure provisions are just strictly for those that are accessory to residential uses. So somewhere to park your car, somewhere to sort of store your residential goods and things like that on your property. All of the setbacks for these structures within these residential zones will be maintained, and all of the maximum sizes will remain the same.
So okay, I'll deal with that after the meeting then, because I have already brought this to the attention of the township and my concern. So I'll follow up with that with Brad after the meeting then.
Okay. Was there anything else there, Kathy?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Brad?
Wendy Hofstetter.
Okay.
And the last person we have registered is Andrea Godot.
So I would ask if there's anyone else online that would like to speak now, if now is your chance. So would you say we've captured everyone there, Brad?
The last person was just Andrea Godot.
Okay, is Andrea? Okay, I'm going to ask then if could township staff please summarize any additional correspondence that's been resubmitted on this application and provide any further information. So have we had any anything to report, Emily or Brad?
Thank you, Chair. We did receive comments from the Ministry of Transportation just stating no objection to the application.
Okay, I'll give it open it up to the committee now if the committee has any questions on the report or the amendment. Member Burkett.
Thank you through the chair, and thank you to Brad and Emily. Well done. And just to everyone online that participated this morning. Isn't Zoom great that we're all able to speak our piece? So thank you to all. I'm just curious on page, and I'm not sure who can answer the question, but on page 20, section 1.5, it says non-complying lots. If I could just get a definition of what a non-complying lot or building means, please, and thank you.
Okay, Brad.
So through the chair to Member Burkett, a non-complying lot would be, for example, a lot that doesn't meet today's frontage or area requirements. So it would be undersized by the bylaw, or where a non-compliant building would be one like on a shoreline property where the dwelling doesn't meet the front yard setback of today. So those would be considered non-compliant buildings or lots.
All right, thank you. So supplementary through the chair, if I may, Brad, if someone has built a structure and it's illegal, like it never had a building permit, we wouldn't allow them to rebuild that building when we find out that they may want a renovation permit, would we?
If it was an illegal building, no, it would only, this section would only apply to legal non-compliant buildings.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Member Dunlop.
Sorry.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, I've got a few questions. The Couchiching Conservancy wanted to rezone to EP. How did they lose that zoning in the beginning?
Through the chair to Member Dunlop, I think that the Couchiching Conservancy has acquired properties over the years. So as they acquire these properties, they would have had whatever zoning was originally on them. So now that they've acquired them, they just want to apply the EP zone.
Okay, I still don't understand that. If it wasn't EP, how can you rezone it to EP? Or was the EP taken off at some time?
Through the chair to Member Dunlop, I see Ms. Mandeville has turned on her camera. She might have some additional comments.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Ms. Vanderbilt.
Thank you, Chair Taylor, to Member Dunlop's question. We received the township received a letter, a couple of letters actually, from the Couchiching Conservancy asking for this request when the township did a housekeeping amendment. So these are, as Mr. Oster pointed out, properties that the Conservancy has acquired over the years. So they did have whatever zoning it may have been. I believe most were Greenlands type zoning previously or are currently on the property. The Couchiching Conservancy, of course, is a not-for-profit organization, and they are looking to rezone these properties to environmental protection in accordance with their mandate. So it is something at a staff level we discussed and decided to include in this amendment. However, if council does not feel that's an appropriate avenue for this, certainly those properties do not need to be considered through this process.
Yeah, I just wondered how somebody could take Greenland and then all of a sudden put EP on it. But I realize it's conservancy, and I don't know whether that gives them a reduction in taxes or even if they pay taxes, I don't know. So my second one was snow storage. If you were building, putting up a structure for commercial, but there wasn't enough room for snow storage, could there be agreement made that they could remove that to a different area?
Through the chair to Member Dunlop, that's definitely something that could be considered as part of the process. The developer may require a minor variance for a reduced snow storage amount, but in consideration of the agreement, that may be something that could be handled through the variance process.
Okay, so my next question, or it's not a question, I agree with Tom, these farmers markets, I don't think I've ever gone to a farmers market that they haven't had crafts and baking. I don't know if you consider baking a farmers market, but I'd like a clear definition of what can be at those. I think it would help going in the future that it doesn't get into gray areas. So I agree with that. There needs to be a complete definition. And then the last one that I have, I think it is the last, is the garden suites extension. When we are looking for low-income housing, I can't see why there wouldn't be an extension in 20 years. It's only going to be worse than it is now. And to have an extension to granny flats that are being built now, they'd only be 20 years old. We have lots of houses older than that. And I've seen some of these granny flats. They're beautiful. And hopefully in 20 years, there will be an extension. Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Anyone else? I have a couple on page 36 of the report, Island Road. There's lots being rezoned from R1 to SR3. And I'm just wondering what the logic behind that. Then therefore, it being SR3, can a building permit be permitted on a private road then, not on water? If anyone could answer that one.
Thank you, Chair. I can speak to that. So essentially the properties had inadvertently been the zoning on those properties had inadvertently been lost or changed to the R1. So because they are on that private portion of Island Road, they currently don't qualify for any building permits. So essentially by changing it to the SR3 zone, it would restore those rights and allow them to access the lot from a private road and qualify for those building permits should they want to.
So are you saying it was zoned SR3 before?
Yes.
Because I'm looking at it there and I think it's a stretch to call it shoreline property.
Thank you, Chair. Oh, Yeah, so it was originally zoned SR3 with the intention that they could have that exception of accessing and be eligible for a building permit because they are located on a private road. Not necessarily the shoreline piece that would be the key there, but more so the private road aspect of that provision.
Because what I'm worried about is just setting a precedent. There's other areas that aren't really shoreline, but they're on private roads, and they'll want it to become SR3, and then you can build on it.
Certainly, we can look more into that if that's something that committee feels we should report back to with more information on for the next meeting, if that would be really helpful.
I think it's opening up a loophole there that we, in some cases, we don't want to entertain that. My second one is on page 39 of 92. It's a simple question on Ormont Road. How can it be rezoned from Crown land to SR3 again? I think you're going to answer there, Brad.
Yeah, so to the chair, the property inadvertently had the Crown land zone applied to it in the past. So it is a privately owned piece of property. It is not owned by the Crown. Okay. So it's likely that when the mapping was digitized, the Crown land zone was just inadvertently applied to the property. So by rezoning it to the SR3 zone, it would just return those residential rights to the property owner.
Okay, that's what I thought, but I just thought I'd ask. Okay. Okay, if that's the committee is any other questions, I'll close the public portion. And is there a draft motion, Madam Clerk, that you'd like to read?
Certainly. So the motion reads that planning report number P22-011 dated March 16th, 2022, with respect to comprehensive zoning bylaw 2010-65 be as amended be received, and further that a draft zoning bylaw amendment be presented to council for consideration at the next available meeting, subject to comments received prior to council's consideration of the zoning bylaw amendment, including additional submissions from the Planning Development Committee, members of the public, circulated agencies, and township departments.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a mover for that, please? Moved by member Stevens, second by member Bettesworth. All in favor? Carried. So I'm going to just call for a quick 5-minute break. If we could all come back at 10 o'clock, and we'll have our delegations then. Thank you very much, everybody. advised that in accordance with council's procedural bylaw, no decision will be made today on the delegations. The committee will do one of the following. A, refer the matter to staff for a report. B, refer the matter to future budget deliberations. Or C, take no action. So first we'll ask Jeff McKay discussing proposed telecommunications tower on Carlyon line. So if Jeff's there, or Victoria, is it?
Yes, thank you, Chair and members of committee.
Okay.
My name is Victoria McKay, and I'm a Municipal and Public Relations Coordinator. And we also do have Jeff McKay, our Site Acquisition Specialist, on this call as well.
Okay.
We're working on behalf of Xplornet Communications on a proposed telecommunications tower in Severn. Xplornet is proposing a 45-meter.
Oh, Victoria, we've lost your audio.
Now we
still can't hear you.
No.
Unfortunately, we still can't hear you.
Can you take over from there, Jeff, or do you? And you're on mute as well.
Yeah, you got me here now. I'm not sure what's happening there.
Okay.
You can hear me?
Yep, absolutely.
All right, we'll see if she can get back on. I'm actually working from a truck in a motel. However, I can kind of pick up where she left off here. The coverage gap here is a fairly large area, fairly well known between two existing facilities that are quite a distance away from them. This one is to pick up the area in Carlyon and general area around it. And I think she's back on. Victoria, have you got Mike?
We can't hear her, but we can see what she's put it on the PowerPoint. If you can speak to the PowerPoint, that would be good.
Yeah, let me I'm just struggling here just a bit with. All right. Okay. All right. So we see down on the bottom of the picture there, the Rogers and Bell combination tower and the Bell tower to the east of there. The light blue circle is the area that the tower is to go in. So this was cited to avoid residential use. It was pretty straightforward site. It was a long way from any residential. There was only one residential property, or one property that fell within the consultation radius other than the landlord's property. The notice was sent out and newspaper publication was done. We received no comments or concerns from anybody in the public or from the municipality to address. So it was pretty straightforward. It's a 45-meter structure here. It's what they call a slim self-support tower. And so pretty straightforward, no particular concerns raised here of sensitive use, of environmental, anything like that in the area. Everything there is zoned basically rural. And then you can see here the zoning area. It's kind of on a rock cut off the side of the road, and so nothing close. The closest residential is 715 meters away, so really not generating any concerns of any type. And then this was the summary of the consultation report. So we closed in the end of February. So only one property was required to be mailed the notice, and they did receive them. Aurelia today was the publication. And again, no comments received at all from public. Yeah, this is just a copy of the draft statement of concurrence motion that would presumably follow this meeting.
Okay. Does anybody on the committee have questions for Jeff or Victoria? So I'll ask the clerk then, how do we proceed here, Allison? If it looks like it's a favorable proposal.
Yeah, so as with other similar applications, we'll refer for a staff report, and staff will come back at a future upcoming meeting.
Excellent. So if we could have a motion, that would be great.
Certainly. So the motion reads that the delegation by Ms. Victoria McKay and Mr. Jeff McKay regarding a proposed telecommunication tower at 1515 Carlyon line be received and referred for a staff report.
Okay, we got a mover there, please. Moved by Member Bestworth, second by Member Cox. All in favor? And that's carried.
Really?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Good luck with your microphone there.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, we'll go to delegation number 2, Dom Carlos shared tower on 1467 Anderson line. Good morning, Dom.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Mayor, Council. It's nice to see everyone again. I'm going to try to upload the presentation quickly. Okay. Is the presentation visible? It just kind of blacked out my screen now that I hit share.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, awesome. So I'm happy to be back again. We're happy to update our proposal. Our team has been working very hard since our last public consultation, our last delegation before council, where our proposal for a telecommunications tower at this location here behind the barn was denied. And so we've been working hard, taking some of those comments back, trying to set the tower back as far away from residents as possible. We've worked really, really hard with our planning team over the last almost year to see where we could place the updated tower, to see where we can locate it so that it could still reach and service the entire Coldwater community while being set back from any nearby residents. And so we're happy to present the council again. We haven't done public consultation. This is our first meeting prior to beginning public consultation or beginning the process with the planning team and working through our application, but we wanted to bring it before council to be as open and transparent as possible and to have any kind of feedback as early as possible. And then also to let you know of our updated application as it runs through the system in case any residents have any questions or comments. You'll be up to date on the new application. So this was the rendering of the old location, the most recent location that was denied. We just wanted to kind of show and keep the view of the tower. So it'll be the same tower style, tower structure and everything. We're just moving it much further south. So just a quick background. I think I've mentioned before, Shared Tower is a third-party telecommunications provider. We've worked with a lot of the largest carriers and wireless internet service providers in order to bring greater network coverage to many communities in Ontario, ranging from the GTA through to rural communities. And in the last couple of years, we've been trying to locate this tower in and near Coldwater in order to bring better wireless cellular coverage and wireless internet to the area. So I'll just give a quick history. So this is our updated location. So we have been working with nearby landowners. So I'll zoom out in a couple seconds, but this is the new proposed location. So it's at 1467 Anderson Line. So it's quite a bit further south. It's still along Anderson Line compared to our most recent application that was denied. But it's quite a bit further south, but still on that east side of Anderson Line, as far south as possible, not close to any residential houses. The nearest residential house is actually to the south, and it's owned by the same owner that owns these two parcels that's separated by the trail. So this is a survey of exactly where it would go, just off the corner of Anderson Line, coming into the property. Right now it's an agricultural field. So we wanted to work with the landowner to take up as little of his agricultural field and his potentially harvested area as possible. And so in working with him, we came up with this location that could be furthest away from as many residents, even including his residential house, as possible, while also being on a parcel of property that is not currently a residential property, doesn't have currently a residential property on it, and to also mitigate taking up as much agricultural space from him. So these are the two parcels that our current owner owns. So the one to the south is, so as you can see, they're both zoned similarly. The one to the south is the property that has the house on it, and the property to the north is the property that we are proposing to locate the tower, and it'll be in the very northwest corner of that northern property. So it's as far away from the house to the south as we could go. And it's also as far away from the houses to the north as possible as well. No residential properties in the area, the closest one being our current owner, and then the next ones being quite far away further along the trail to the east or down into Coldwater itself. And I believe it's close to 500 meters away. So in working with our site selection, this is just a high level overview of our applications we've tried. So the first one was quite a few years ago now, up on Anderson Line on the west side. That one was too close to residential properties. And so that application was denied. We then went south west onto the other side of Coldwater. And that application was carried through. The motion was carried, our application was approved. But when trying to build, there were quite a bit of issues because it's so low. It became unbuildable. And so we had to come back to the drawing board and seek for another location that would be buildable again. That's when we proposed the third location up on top of the hill, up on Anderson Line. During our public consultation, our application process, it was deemed that this location was too close to nearby residents. And so we took that information and those comments and the feedback and worked as hard as possible with our planning team, with our acquisition team, with our planners, our municipal specialists, to see where we could locate it as far away from all the residents as possible, either on Anderson Line, in Coldwater itself, while still being able to reach Coldwater. And it brings us to the new proposed location here south on Anderson Line. And then just at a high level, a quick scan through our old application. So this is the first one at 1071. It feels like ages ago. I believe I attended this meeting in person. So that's so 1071 Anderson Line. And then we went down to 1287 or 12,087 Highway 12. And then back up to Anderson Line at 1081. And then now we're down further south. And this is an overview of the current current towers in the area. So you can see here highlighted in red, there's a Rogers Tower to the northeast, a Bell and Orion Tower. Orion is a private network to the southeast. The Rogers application is to the northwest. And then our tower highlighted in blue to cover Coldwater. And that's a high level overview of our application and what we're looking to proceed with the township and move on through the application process, working with the planning team to refine our application and to work through the public consultation process, gather any input or feedback from nearby residents or any residents of Coldwater, and then bring that back before council for their information at the end of our public open house, all of that application process, so they can have an update on how our application's going and how everything went. And then that's how we foresee us proceeding in this one, and then move on to the approval process much further in the future if all that goes well.
Okay, thank you. Does the committee have any questions for Dom? If you could unshare your screen.
Oh,
there.
Absolutely.
Member Cox.
Yeah, through the chair to Dom, and I think Letitia's listening is here too. I just really wanted to thank you for working so hard with the residents and being so aware and empathetic with their concerns, their health concerns. And I'm really happy about this one, and it looks like it's probably in a really good spot. But I just had to thank you because I know you have been doing a lot of work with them, and that's very nice. Thanks.
Thank you. And of course, that's our number one goal, is to work with the community on all our applications. So thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Allison, if you have a motion for us.
You do. Okay, so the motion reads that the presentation by Dom Carlos Shared Tower Inc. regarding a proposed telecommunication tower at 1467 Anderson Lawn be received for information.
Got to move it there. Moved by member Dunlop, second by member Cox. All in favor? It's all carried.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you. Have a great day. Next, we'll go to section E of the consent agenda. Does anyone have any consent agenda items to be pulled for new business? I have one, E 1.1.
Okay.
That's okay. Then approval of the regular agenda.
Okay, so the motion reads that the agenda be adopted, including consent items, with the exception of item number E 1.1.
We've got a mover there. Moved by member Stevens, second by member Betzworth. All in favor? Carried. Section G, reports from officials for direction. I don't see any. New business. 1.1. I'm going to ask if I could relinquish the chair. I'd like to speak to it, and if the co-chair, member Dunlop, could act as chair.
Thank you, Member Taylor. So we will go back to E 1.1. Member Taylor, you want to speak on that?
Yeah, I'd like to thank staff for that. They promised they'd have the report today, and it's here. And a couple of comments and my thoughts on it. And as mentioned earlier, I believe that the deposit of $15,000 is way too much, and I believe it should be $2,500. And if the $2,500 were to be approved, I have a question to staff. In there, you've mentioned that, and I would agree to it, that there should be no charge to the township. So in your opinion, what has to be changed to make this work? Is it just simply changing 15,000 to 2,500? And what would be the approximate charge for staff time and lawyer fees? Is there a ballpark number there? I don't know if Katie could answer that.
Katie, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Dunlop, to Member Taylor's questions. Sorry, I'm not 100% clear on your first question, Member Taylor. You said what could be changed to the 2,500?
Like to me, where I'm sitting, you're just changing 15,000 to a new number. Is there more to it than that, or am I missing something?
So if I may, Chair Dunlop, through to Member Taylor, I think as I outlined in the report, for the 3 existing agreements, each of those would have to be, those agreements that are registered on title would have to be altered. For a future agreement, council at that time, when they authorize the agreement or when the agreement comes before them, they could change that number at that point. It is a deposit amount that's determined for each situation, so it's not something that is in our fees and charges bylaw.
Right. So in your report, you're saying that there is a possibility that sometime down the road, the new official plan, if approved, the people could get all their deposit back. Is that, can you comment on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Through Chair Dunlop to Member Taylor. I think what I was trying to say in the report is that as council's aware, we're undergoing a new official plan right now. Our official plan review is currently undergoing. So it is anticipated that in the next 3 to 5 years, I suspect we won't have any garden suite agreements, because why would the folks want a garden suite agreement when likely they'll be allowed a permanent second dwelling? So I think it would be worth the time and money, both, staff resource time, as well as the applicant's money and lawyers' time and money as well, to basically clear all of those agreements, simply remove them all from title and refund all of the deposit money once those structures can become permanent dwellings.
But as everyone knows here, that 5 years is not, it could be appealed. It could be 10 years. Like I would say, like my recommendation is that if we agree that the new deposit should be $2,500, then each applicant could request a refund from the township for their own money back, less any expenses incurred by the township. I did speak to one of the property owners, and they're not in favor of waiting 5 years for this. They would like, assuming the costs aren't horrendous for the legal fees and township fees, that they would like their majority of their deposit back, and then if and when the official plan does go through and the refunds do come back, any remaining deposits would be returned to the owners. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair Dunlop. I just wanted to comment. I think council's all familiar with, in the past, how many appeals were launched on new official plans. However, the legislation has changed a great deal in the past few years. And I'm hoping our director can correct me if I'm mistaken here, but I don't believe you can actually appeal a new official plan these days. I think it's limited to specific sections of an official plan. And I don't believe additional housing units would be subject to an appeal. Is that right, Ms. Woodrow?
Thank you, Ms. Mandeville. Through you, Chair Dunlop. Yes, I'm confirming what Ms. Mandeville is stating is correct.
So through Chair Dunlop to Member Taylor's question, although, I gave 3 to 5 years as an actual conservative estimate in this time period, I think the demand is there that we could do some kind of similar housekeeping type amendment once the new official plan is in place. And our timeline originally was to have that new official plan at least endorsed by this township council by this summer. I'm not sure we're quite right on track with that. Obviously, COVID has threw some wrenches in that process. However, I do think we are still on track to be, looking at this new official plan this year in 2022. So the 3 to 5 years was really a conservative, worst case scenario, because I do know how these things play out. Whereas in reality, because of the demand we're seeing for these increased units, and I think working towards more affordable housing options, that's something we could tackle as soon as we have a new official plan in place, rather than waiting for a whole new comprehensive zoning bylaw.
Yeah, through the chair to Katie, then what I might recommend is that some of the people are online watching it today, and if they feel that they don't want to wait a year or 2 or 3 years, they could still put a request into the planning committee and then go from there, rather than, I don't want to speak directly, let them initiate it there, and then you may have a better timetable then. But I'm just thinking that we want affordable housing for everybody here, and these are a great thing for the township. And there's two right on Irish Line in my ward, and I know they look great and like to keep them around. But I think we should listen to what they're asking for, and that's what I think at this point. Thank you.
Okay, Member Bettesworth, and then Member Burkett. You're muted there, John.
I'm terribly sorry. Through you, Madam Chair, notwithstanding those comments from staff, I think in the interim, I would support Member Taylor's proposal and put this in the meantime, and then mop this up down the road whenever we make some permanent changes. But these are issues that may be holding back applications from people that want a garden suite. So I would propose that we interim go to $2,500. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Bettesworth, or Member Burkett, sorry.
Thank you, through Madam Chair. I will not support the $2,500. I'm sorry. I think based on, and thank you, Katie, for a well-written report, based on what I'm hearing and the fact that we're in the midst of a new official plan, and it will come out. The province recognizes that we're short, and housing is a huge requirement in our area. I feel that the 3 to 5 years is conservative, but what we are doing, the previous 3 garden suites now will have to take upon themselves and have it registered on title. We'll have to pay a legal fee. Staff's time will be wasted. And this is going to come to fruition. It's going to happen where it will be a right that they will be able to have an accessory building on a property, provided they meet all the requirements. They will have to pay this fee again to remove whatever amount of money we're looking at reducing it by. And we all have to remember the first 3, we were in favor of staff's report. Now we're asking to have a reduction. The 4th person that has come forward with the garden suite knew what the conditions were and is now asking for a reduction. They're going to get their monies back. I can see it. I don't think it's going to take the 5 years. The province understands the need, as I said, and I can't honestly vote in favor of making our residents go through 2 sets of lawyers' fees as well as our staff's time.
Member Taylor.
Through the chair to Katie, further to what Member Burkett said, what fees would be involved if the new official plan is approved that these are allowed? My understanding there would be no fees.
Katie.
Through Chair Dunlop, thank you to Member Taylor. I believe it was outlined in the report. Anytime we go to amend an existing agreement that's on title, so whether that's amending the agreement to change something written inside the agreement, like the amount of securities or the amount of deposit we've collected, or whether that's amending the agreement to remove it from title, there are fees associated with that. So generally speaking, we charge an administrative fee to cover staff time. And we also, of course, charge a legal deposit to cover any legal work associated with that. So changing the wording of an agreement, I believe, would be more cumbersome on the legal time. So that would be a greater fee than simply removing the agreement. I believe more of a legal clerk type position can apply basically on behalf of the lawyer to remove this agreement. So either way, there for sure would be legal fees and staff time associated with that. So Mayor Burkett, Member Burkett in this case, is correct in that, if they wanted to alter it in the interim, they would be paying fees, and then they would also pay fees to remove the agreement from title should they wish to keep it permanently. There may be a situation of one of the 3 existing right now where they don't want to keep it permanently. I mean, I'm not sure why someone would want to do that, but it would be up to the property owner themselves if they wanted to initiate that process at that time. Ms. Woodrow actually had just messaged me that she also had a point. In order to amend any agreement currently registered on title, if there is a mortgage on the property, that would be additional legal fees. Anytime we register something on title, the mortgage has to be postponed, which is additional work for the lawyer as well as the applicant's mortgage company or mortgage broker. So if anyone did want to have this amended in the interim, that would also need to go through a postponement if there is a mortgage on title to that property, whereas removing an agreement would not require that same process.
Member Taylor.
Yeah, through the chair, I'd still like, I agree with Member Bestworth to change it to 2,500 and then have the onus on the property owner. If they want to weigh out, if they want to do it twice, then that's their decision.
Okay,
Member I'd like to see. I'd like to see a motion to that effect.
Member Burkett and then Member Cox.
Thank you. I would like to wait until we have our official, sorry, through you, Madam Chair. I would like to wait until the official plan is done to see which direction these garden suites or said accessory buildings are going to go, because they're going to be part of our official plan. I don't think another year is going to make, or another 6 months is going to make a difference. If at the end of that 6 months, there's not something in our official plan that dictates what can and can't be done, we should just leave it alone. Those are just my comments. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Member Cox. You're muted, Member Cox.
Sorry, through the chair, I was impressed with what Katie said about the official plan will go so far, and then if we need to, we could bring that forward and do it as an amendment. And that way you're not waiting 3 to 5 years. That way no one is costing anyone any money, staff time money, residents any money, and it won't be that long. So I would prefer to go with what Katie had suggested. Thank you.
So I have a question, Katie. If this goes through on the official plan and this is taken off, is that going to cost these people that have these suites now? Is that going to cost them to clear that? I want to be clear on that. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Chair Dunlop. Absolutely. So if it is put into our official plan, which we fully anticipate it will, as that's the provincial direction, that there's multiple single detached dwellings will, for argument's sake, allowed on one property. In order to remove these agreements from title, they would be subject to a legal fee and likely some sort of nominal staff fee. As I said, the removal is less cumbersome than changing an existing agreement on title. So they would be subject to something. And I think in the interim, we would likely be able to get some estimates on what that would be. And likely would also have to update our fees and charges bylaw to ensure there is a fee for removing agreements from title, since we know this will be coming. And likely also then amending agreements on title, agreements for this purpose, sorry. We obviously in our fees and charges bylaw already have fees for amending other agreements.
Okay, so thank you, Katie. So Allison, do you have some form of a motion there for us that we can, you could read, please?
So Member Taylor asked for a motion to be put on the table. So I will read that. If that were to fail, then we'll fall back to the original staff report recommendation.
Okay.
So the motion reads then that planning report number P22-012 dated March 16th, 2022 with respect to garden suites be received, and further that future deposits for garden suites be set at 2,500, and further that existing agreement holders be permitted to apply to have their deposit reduced provided they pay for any and all associated township costs.
Mover and a seconder. Oh, just sorry, Member Taylor.
I'd like to ask for a recorded vote.
Okay. Where you go, Allison? Oh, I still need a mover and a seconder.
Still need a mover and a seconder.
Oh, okay, good.
Mover and seconder.
Member Taylor and Member Betzworth.
Okay, and I will call the vote. Member Taylor, for or against?
For.
Okay. Member Cox, for or against? That's against. Okay. Member Betzworth, for or against? That's for. Member Stevens, for or against? Okay, that is against. Member Burkett, for or against?
Against.
That's lost.
And Member Dunlop, for or against?
No, I'm going to go against it.
Okay, so that is lost.
Okay.
Okay, give me 1 minute to just create another motion here. So the motion reads that planning report number P22-012 dated March 16th, 2022 with respect to garden suites be received for information.
Mover and a seconder, please. Moved by member Cox, seconded by member Burkett. All in favor? That's
One no.
That's carried.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll assume the chair again.
It's all yours, member Taylor.
Okay, and I'm going to ask for an adjournment motion.
Motion reads that this meeting be and is turned by adjourned at 10:35 a.m.
We have a mover there, please. Moved by member Stevens, second by member Dunlop. All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much.
Have a good day.